Hey everyone, this is Allan McKay, and welcome to episode 9. I'm interviewing Todd Sheridan Perry on working from home and setting up your own business. This is awesome. Let's get in.
Welcome to the Allan McKay Podcast. Allan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Allan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Allan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on AllanMcKay.com.
Hey everyone, this is Allan McKay, and I'm in Las Vegas this week talking at Autodesk University, a massive conference. I'm talking on quadrupling your job opportunities and positioning yourself as an expert in your field. So this is a really cool talk. There's currently a few hundred people attending the talk. I don't know how many others are going to show up, but it's going to be a really epic turnout. What's been even more awesome is that I've only been here not even 24 hours yet, and I've had so many people coming up to me. I'm at the Mandalay Bay Hotel, and I've had so many people in the lobby coming up just to say that they love the podcast, and yeah, it's shocking. I love it. I guess I get a little bit detached from the industry at times, just with so much work going on, and to kind of get back in touch with everyone in the industry and like events like this, which is so big and so many of the leading people all over the world all coming to these events. It's awesome. It's great to catch up with everyone, and just to have everyone mention, even last night with all the Autodesk guys, just having them, even the higher ups, mentioning how much they love the podcast. It's just been really inspiring, and I really admire it. So I love it, and thank you again, everyone, for all your support. We're up to 20,000 viewers, and it's only been out for a little over a month now, so it blows my mind. So thank you again. I'm going to be contributing as much as I can and making this my baby as much as I can. One thing I will mention, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but this month, and I will give more information about this at the end of the episode, but I am going to dedicate my entire month, again, this is coming out of my own pocket, I'm taking a month off from work, specifically to dedicate it to December, to all of you guys who want to step your career up and do big things next year. So I'm going to be putting out 3 episodes a week through all of December, and I want all of you, I really urge all of you to all participate and commit to this, because I want this to be a month of transformation for all of us, and I'm going to be putting out content specifically all solo pieces to help you guys really up your game, set your goals, and hit your goals for next year, both with negotiating more money, with even working overseas. There's going to be lots of really cool stuff. So that's going to be a big thing for me. Get ready for this, because it's going to be pretty phenomenal. I'll give more information afterwards, but in the meantime, this episode is all about a good friend of mine, Todd Sheridan Perry. He has worked for Weta, he's worked for Blur, he's worked on a lot of really high-profile films. He's an extremely talented guy. I've known him for over 10 years now, and coincidentally I bumped into him at Blur just recently. He popped in for the day, and yeah, we just had a quick chat about the stuff, and I'm really excited about this just because he's someone who's very successful but also works from home. And this is something that I'm going to do a solo episode on myself, which will be more hands-on tactics and things like that. But Todd really killed it. He put in a lot of really great information as well as resources to check out. I will try and put all those in the course notes. Now, on top of that, it's just been really great to see someone, like, working from home is one thing, but working on high-profile stuff from home is definitely, I think, the future of where we're all heading. And I think that if you're able to do it, then it really opens up a lot of freedom to your life. You're not slaving away at the office 24 hours a day. So that being said, let's dive in, but I'm really excited about this one. There's lots of really solid information. Todd is a very talented, very smart guy, so yeah, I won't talk it up anymore, but I really loved this episode. And like I said, guys, at the end of this episode, I'm going to give you guys a bit of really cool information. One last thing I will mention is the contest I ran a few weeks ago. I will be announcing the winners next episode. So if you haven't yet, go on to my link here, this show notes even. So www.allanmckay.com/9 for episode 9. And just go to the iTunes link and simply subscribe, and also just leave a rating and review, like a short review in there. And then I'm going to randomly go and collect 5 people from there to give a free 1-month membership to Digital Tutors, which is going to be awesome. And so I'm going to be announcing that next week, so you've still got time to get in there. Lastly, I've also got another gift from Digital Tutors. They let me put up a course I made for them a while back as a gift for all my listeners. So again, if you go to my link, allanmckay.com/9, there's another link on there where you can get access to the entire, it's a RealFlow Python scripting course. It also goes through lighting in V-Ray and everything else too. So it's pretty awesome, and I'm really grateful for them to let me do that. And yeah, so enjoy. That's my gift to you. And also more information after this. So thanks again. Let's get into this episode. I kind of figured, just to begin, do you want to give me a bit of how you would introduce yourself at a cocktail party, or when people ask you, what you do for a living?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I would say, hey, I'm Todd Perry. I'm a visual effects supervisor and a CG supervisor during the day, and I'm a screenwriter at night.
Cool.
And that's usually how it gets started.
That's awesome. Actually, that's one thing I did want to pick your brain about. We will dive into it later on, but the screenwriting portion too. And I did see your rant today about Christopher Nolan on Facebook. So
Yes.
I haven't seen it yet. We're meant to see a movie tonight, but my girlfriend came back from the zoo, and because we're in South Carolina, and she passed out, so we decided to drink wine and play card games all night instead. But I mean, you've worked on a crap ton of stuff, which is really awesome. And I kind of figured, just in the beginning, do you just want to start out like talking about how you started and how you kind of delved into this? Especially, I find, for people who've been doing this for over a decade, there's always a bit more of a story there, because it's not about, I went to school and I followed this route. It's more some big turning point along the way. So I'm just kind of curious, like, how did you get started out?
Well, I was inspired when I was really, really young. My cousins, their dad worked for JPL and Lockheed and companies like that, like aerospace companies, and so they just inherited his brains, and so hanging around them, they just kind of instilled this science stuff on me. And part of that was filmmaking. And so at 6, I was doing like stop motion animation movies, and they're like, here, if you take a picture here and then you move it, and you take a picture here and you move it, and then we go get it developed, and then we watch it, and it moves around. And so then they showed me that, and then they showed me computer, and this was kind of evolving because we spent summers together, and it was like, hey, here's a TRS-80 color computer, and here's a Commodore. And so it was just evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 77, my cousin Mark said, you need to go see Star Wars. And I remember thinking, you know what, this looks really cheesy. I'm 8 and I'm thinking this looks cheesy. And so we went to go see it like the next weekend, and then I was hooked. And that's all I did. Was I watched movies, I drew, I made models, I researched all of this stuff. I watched any kind of behind the scenes I could, and the focus may have swayed around, like, oh, I could do animation, oh, maybe I'll do effects animation, oh, maybe I'll do makeup stuff, oh, maybe I'll model build.
Yep.
But it was always toward this thing of doing visual effects.
Well, let me just jump in for 1 sec and say that, because I've heard that from, I'm actually getting kind of experience now at interviewing everyone, because I talk to so many people, but that's one thing I love, is that everyone does kind of say the same thing, and the good thing is that everything that you're doing all kind of cross supports each other. So it all
Hmm.
complements each other. Basically, you do one thing that, let's say, makeup, like Mitch Gates and a few other those guys, like they came from doing prosthetics and then they moved into doing CG. And of
Yeah.
course, all the information you've learned along the way will help you and aid you later on. And so that's good. Even though you're experimenting, all you're doing is you're strengthening all these different areas that later on you will benefit from, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and that analog, for lack of a better term, artwork just came together at exactly the right moment, uh, because the Macintosh came out in '84, and so I got to start to play with that. And my dad was kind of a computer head too, as well as my cousin. So I had this tech brain, but I was creative, and so that tool, that new tool in our toolbox, started becoming very interesting to me. And so then it just kind of led directly into the CG stuff. And so I was always doing that type of thing. And in college, I worked on the at the TV station on campus, and I kind of designed my own major, because the art department didn't have an animations
Hmm.
course or animation program, and but I could take internships in Seattle. And so I proposed this, if I take internships up in here, can I get credit for this and this and this? And I took photography, and so in the TV station, I learned how to edit and shoot. And in photography class, we're just starting to get into computers there. And so then I got into, I was hired right out of college to work at a multimedia company in Seattle, but I really wanted to be in LA. And uh, so I was applying for places in LA and just not hearing back and not hearing back. And so after a big project, I said, "Listen, I'm out of here. Um, I'm just going to go down to Los Angeles and find myself a job. If I don't have a job in say 3 months, then I'll just apply to USC or something like that to get my master's." And before the 3 months were up, I had three jobs. So
Well,
one was,
let me cut in for one sec. Sorry to cut you off, but again, this is something I'm fascinated by because I've had to deal with this a bit recently, where there's been a lot of people who've kind of picked up and moved to LA, and everyone's got their strategy. And I guess I've seen a few people just completely crash and burn
mhm,
recently doing this, and it's kind of made me really aware. And that's why I kind of want to make other people aware too about how to do it right and how to do it wrong, because yeah, I've seen some people have to literally go back with their tail between their legs just because
yeah,
they didn't really, because again, LA is such a place that even in CG, the typical thing of like you hop on the bus and you're like, okay, I'm going to Hollywood to be famous, and everyone who's pretty goes in that bus, they get off and they're like, okay, where do I go to be famous? And it's
yep.
not that easy, obviously, and you need to think ahead. So I mean, I just want to quickly dive in that for a sec, but
Yeah.
I don't know, like, how did you do it? Did you kind of you obviously you gave yourself a time limit, but you put aside money, and did you have any key strategies that just at least made you a bit more smarter about doing it than some people might have?
The key strategy was, yes, I had money. I knew how much money. I knew how much my budget was when I got down there, and I knew I had basically blanketed the place with resumes, and there wasn't the online resume or the online reel or anything like that. It was
VHS and printed
yeah,
resume. Yep.
and I barely had uh, a reel. I didn't have a visual effects reel, and for animation, I had paper. So at one of the, I got hired at a video game company
So you actually had to show
as an animator.
actual cells, like bring in,
I
like,
brought in I brought in a stack of animation paper
wow,
that I basically gave to the art animation director, and she could flip through them and
literally flip through
flip through them and say,
them.
"Okay, well, we'll give you a little test, and then off we go." Um, but I had started to develop contacts via online, and this was like primitive online, so this was like AOL chat room type
Mhm.
stuff.
Yep.
And so I had developed a community through a chat room called Hollywood Tonight, So I had developed uh, not so much a support system, but a community. So when I went down there, I had friends that I could hang out with who were also in the film industry, and one of them was a visual effects dude who was like traditional, like optical guy who was moving into After Effects, and so he taught me a whole bunch of stuff, and I was his like 3D guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then through that same community, I got the connection to the animation job at the video game company, and then the third job was just via sending in reels or sending in resumes.
Yep.
And they just needed a Photoshop. They were like, "Do you know Photoshop?" And I said yes. Okay, what's your rate? And that's kind of how it played out. But so yes, I moved down there. Yes, I took a chance, and yes, I had a plan. But I had also previously set up a system of contacts that I could connect with once I got down there.
Yep, and that's key. And I mean, even more so than just cold calling, I mean, I think that having those contacts are the most crucial thing because, again, it's the easiest way to get fast-tracked to getting a job than, them saying, okay, we don't know you, but you may or may not be good, let's take a gamble and roll the dice. So, it's got way more value than anything else. So, that's cool. And from there, I mean, how quickly did things escalate from those first key jobs?
It went, let's see, after the first project at the video game company,
What year was that, sorry?
95.
Yeah, screw you. You're like, yeah, I've got like a little bit more experience than you. Like, it sounds like you've been killing it for quite a damn while.
So 95 is when I moved down there, and I got the job, those three jobs, and then after the first project I worked on, I was made art director of the next job that came through.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept on that path, but I was still freelancing, doing the visual effects stuff and learning and getting my reel built up. So when ultimately that company closed down, the video game company closed down, and I put my reel together, I had no video game stuff on it at all. It was all the freelance stuff that I had been doing while I was at the video game company. And I went out, and my first job after that was with a guy named Greg Pyros, who was a early 3DS R4 proponent.
That rings a bell, that name.
Yeah, he was pretty big time back then. And I commuted from the Valley to Irvine.
God.
To to get down there and work on a Zork title, an early Zork title, which was kind of mist-like. So
Mm-hmm.
It was like point and click, and the camera moved around type stuff.
Right.
But I knew that Greg Pyros knew Frank Foster.
Jeez.
And Frank Foster was at Sony ImageWorks.
Yep.
And so I kept on harping on Pyros, saying, "Okay, we're wrapping this up here. Can you introduce me to Frank Foster?" And so he finally did, and I kept on pestering Frank Foster like every couple of weeks, I guess. It's kind of just tagging him, not
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Hey, do you have any work for me?" but more like, "Hey, I have a potential job coming up, but I wanted to check in with you before I actually said yes to this thing, because I would really rather work at ImageWorks with your team."
Well, that's brilliant.
Kind
Like, because again, like, I think that a lot of the stuff, like, you can kind of look into the psychology of it, and even like whether, of course, you do have work coming up, but that really gives you a lot of social proof. It puts you at higher value if you're contacting people while you have work. And like, I did a talk recently about this stuff, and like, I spoke to a couple of guys at Blur actually who had mentioned how they had actually done that to get a job at Blur. But again, just kind of like picking the time to approach people is not when you're in need. It's more about when you contact someone, you can easily say, "Hey, I'm not actually looking for work, but I just wanted to send my work right now. I'm currently doing this, this, and this," and it's a great chance to plug all the projects you're on, but at the same time, like, there's no pressure on their end. Like, okay, you're emailing me because you want something. It's more like, okay, it's more of a social call, and that way, they're more likely to respond just because, they're not feeling that weight of like, okay, I need to respond with an answer, otherwise, because that's what you contacted me about. So, that's kind of like a really good strategy, again, to dive into. Sorry.
It's kind of like it's kind of like dating. You're
Yep.
never more attractive than when you're actually with somebody.
Yeah, it's wearing the wedding ring.
And so finally he called me in, and I had an interview, and I got hired. And at that point, it was our small 3D Studio Max digital fusion group of about 10 people or so in this huge building that was SGI and Alias Power Animator and Starship Troopers was going on, and Contact was going on, and we were just this kind of little aisle of disrespected artists because we were not on SGIs.
Yep.
But we were getting our stuff done, and our stuff looked good, and then they were thinking about disbanding us because they didn't have any work for us, and people were going, oh, well, I guess I'll just do tutorials then and wait around. And because of all of my freelance stuff that I had done earlier, I had done stuff on X-Files and things like that, and so I went to the producer and I said, listen, I have some contacts in television. I might be able to bring some work into this department. What do you think of that? And they said, but we really have to run lean on this. Television just won't pay ImageWorks' 33% profit and 33% overhead, and leaving 33% for it to actually do the job. So we have to really run lean. And they said, okay, well, yeah, that sounds really good. I said, okay, well, let's get a contract signed up and we'll start to work on this. Oh, well, we'll have a contract for you when you start to bring work in. And I said, that you guys know that's not how it works. It's not going to work that. I can't. They could just leave at any moment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I can't promise that I'll bring them in and then just kind of invest myself into this, into your company.
Yeah.
So basically, my partner and I, we said, you know what, we can do this on our own. We don't need ImageWorks' infrastructure and everything to handle this kind of work. And Blur had just started. They were like a year old or a year and a half old or something like that.
I was talking to Tim Miller actually about because I'm going to deviate on this for a second, but I was talking to Tim about this because you know how there's like the Time Machine web internet cache where it has like all the old like internet from like 97, 98, whatever, and you can go back in time and look up what websites looked like back then. I dug up because I was trying to find, I don't know if you remember this, but I was trying to find Blur's like career or jobs page back then, where it's just like a big long thing of like, we don't want this, we don't want this, we don't want to see fucking shit from you until we see your reel. And it was just so obnoxious because that's what Blur was back then. And I ended up finding Blur's old website. I didn't have that page, unfortunately, but I sent that out to Blur and to Tim directly. I was just like, just saying congratulations on a successful, 20 years almost now. And, it's funny to look back at like who you guys were back then. And Tim, I think, was pretty embarrassed because he was trying to figure out who wrote it. It was either him or Stinnett, but he's like, man, like, I'm cocky, but I'm not that cocky because the page was just like, we're going to prove to the world that SGIs don't need to exist, and we're going to show everyone, like, we're going to take over the world, so watch out. And it was just really over the top, but they did it,
They did, and that was our inspiration for knowing that this was possible. And so we started our company, which was called Max Inc. Cafe, and we just got a little space on the beach in Venice with like 2 rooms, and we hired Darren Ross.
Jeez.
as our
Okay,
first.
that's a question right there. I'm gonna jump in for one sec again. Sorry, but
Yep.
I'm getting all nostalgic here. But I want to know all about what Darren was like back then, because I've seen many 50 Shades of Darren.
50 Shades there.
But I didn't actually. Okay, I've known you since 2004, and I didn't. In fact, you're right. You did tell me this, and I completely forgot. But yeah, I completely forgot that you were one of the partners of Max Inc. Because you guys did some really awesome. I remember now, like we were working on Go for Broke, and we talked about this like one late night. But yeah, like Max Inc. was doing some really awesome work back then. You guys did
Yeah.
some really cool stuff.
Well, we thought so. It's probably dated if I look back on it now, given the technology and how far we've come in such a small amount of time. But we got on our feet. We started getting stuff in, and we invested into clients that would allow us to build our reel and start relationships. And we did stuff for Roger Corman, which is all really shitty work, but shitty looking work. But it was working with Roger Corman.
The Last Hope, I just remembered. Is that like it was something Hope you guys did? It was like a
Only Hope.
Only Hope, yep. Because
Yeah.
I remember seeing some breakdowns you guys did, and it looked cool. Like it was really inspiring at the time because there wasn't that much effects work coming out
Yeah.
in Max, and you guys were killing it.
Right. Um, so we did Maxine Cafe for quite a while, 5 years until that fateful 4 years until that fateful year of 9/11. We had 3 jobs on the plate, and then all of them just went away
Wow.
at once. One of them put us into a serious amount of debt because it was a game cinematic,
Mhm.
but we pitched it as a live action thing because they wanted it to feel like old 50s style sci-fi, like really campy. Like you can tell that stuff are sets and the
Yep.
models are on strings and things like that. And I was like, why would we recreate that in CG? Why don't we just shoot it, models on strings
Mhm.
and make that the cinematic? And they said, oh wow, that's a great idea. But in production, when you go to a shoot, 90% of your budget is blown when you start shooting.
Yep.
And in CG, it's kind of spread out. You get 25% up front, and you get 25% in the middle, and then you get the rest in the end, and it's all spread out. Well, all of our budget was spent, so we had invested into it. And then on the day of the shoot, like we had picked up film stock, and we had picked up the cameras and everything, and they called and they said, "Oh yeah, we're not going to do this."
Wow.
And so we said, "Fuck." And at that point, it was kind of debilitating, and so I talked to my partner Jennifer, who was the producer, and I said, I don't think that I want to. This is too much. So tell you what, I'm just going to apply to Weta and a couple of other places, and we'll see how it goes.
Mhm.
And so I applied, and then I was waiting. And for Weta, it's always like, well, you have to wait a fortnight, and then you have to wait another fortnight, and it just kept on going. And then Darren had already left us and went over to Blur.
Yep.
And so Darren said to Tim, "Hey, we need a little bit of help here on this project. Todd's available." And we were always just like friendly competition.
Yep.
We weren't like head to head. We're doing the same thing and we're gonna kill each other. But it was like we were like friends across the pond type of thing. And so I just went over there and was working there for a couple weeks on this Blood Rain thing.
All right, with Willie Hammis and a few. Oh, actually, Willie was remote for that project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just before Z got there.
Mhm.
But that was when I got the call from Weta, was when I was at Blur, and so picked up and headed off to Weta for 2 towers. And then when we came back, the company was still alive, and so we kept on. I kept on doing stuff under the company. It was just kind of being outsourced by the company. And in the meantime, we were working on film projects. So we were doing a whole bunch of short films that Jennifer was producing. And so we were kind of doing these production things while I was off kind of wandering around like a nomad, going from place to place, working on visual effects stuff at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that kept on going for quite a while. One of the places I went to was uncharted territory.
Right.
And I worked on the Triangle, and ended up we ended up getting nominated for an Emmy, and then we actually won, which is I was like, whoa! I was not expecting this at all.
Was the Triangle the one with ships and other stuff in it?
Yeah, it was a Bermuda Triangle
Yep.
thing. There are submarines and time distortions and.
Yeah, I think like I came in just for no. I popped in there once, like early on. Like Brandon Davis was there, and I think Ryan, a few of the other guys. I came in just for basically. I came in with Chris Harvey, and Chris was coming in for a job interview, and I didn't realize this at the time. And they were all like, "Yeah, bring Allan along. Sounds cool." So I wandered into the office, and I met Volker and all the other guys, and I sat down and proceeded to sit in like an hour-long job interview without without knowing that I was going to be sitting in there, and like I was. They all seemed fine with it. I was really uncomfortable, just being like, should I leave? So yeah, it was just kind of funny. It was just like, clearly I should be sitting here while you guys talk about this stuff. But I think that was 2003 though, so I'm not sure what the heck they were doing. But I mean, it's kind of funny how they kind of sporadically ramp up, ramp down, and they've been really successful until now doing that.
Yeah, that was their gig. But now Mark is president of Method, so he's not into that game anymore.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to try and quickly wrap this up so that that we can move on to.
Well, couple things. Actually, I want you to answer two questions real quick.
Sure.
Darren Ross, what was he, like? How old was he back then? Would he have been like his mid-20s? It wouldn't have been that long ago, actually. I guess
it would have been
late 20s.
97, so it would have been late 20s.
Yep.
Late 20s. He'd just come from Chicago.
To be an actor and take over Hollywood?
No.
I love Darren. That's why I can push his buttons about this stuff.
that was a late goal for him, I think. I mean, he and Jeremy Cook came out to LA at the same time, and Jeremy went to Blur, and Darren came to work for us.
Yep.
And he was just all ready to go on CG, but he was willing to do anything. He was an extra in Only Hope, and anytime we did motion capture, I think he was part of the early motion capture stuff at House of Moves that we did.
Yeah.
So that kind of probably bit him as a motion capture bug.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, he's great. He definitely is always on top of his shit, which I love about him.
Yeah.
And, no, that's really awesome. And the other thing, I was just curious about this because like I've worked with Frank Foster before, but one thing like everyone always kept telling me was that he was the creator. He was responsible for creating the Targa format. I'm just curious whether you can back that up because I don't know. Like it always kind of surprised me to kind of hear that because that was apparently his big claim to fame was he created the TGA Targa format.
Mm-hmm. I can neither confirm nor deny whether he did that or not.
Right.
I'm not sure. He when I met him, he was just basically the producer of our group, and and then when that group disbanded, I mean we catch up every once in a while, but we don't hang out or anything like that.
Yeah, he's not a bad guy. I worked with him again, like over 10 years or longer than that, actually. But all right, just curious, like when you worked at Weta, what was your experience like? Because again, it's changed so much over the years, but you were
For
there
sure.
Two Towers, is that right?
Two towers.
And
Yeah.
what were you mainly working on?
I was assigned as a lighting TD to the Gollum team,
Mm-hmm.
and which is kind of awesome.
Yeah.
And then, as my Gollum tasks started wrapping up, I was starting to light um, massive stuff. But they put me as a lighting TD. There wasn't any more room in the lighting area, so they put me in the massive area. And so I was kind of this lone man out among the massive people, and so I would get my stuff into the queue, and then I had nothing to do. And so I just turned and said, "Why don't you show me this massive stuff?"
Yeah.
And because I need something to do, so I might as well learn this stuff. And so I got a couple of simulations into the show by the end of it,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I started, because I was familiar with how the massive pipeline was structured. Uh, at that time, the backbone of Weta was on Perl, and so all the tools and stuff were run through Perl scripts. And so, as a lighting TD and then as a massive TD, when I started lighting massive, the tools were different between a normal, like a character lighting pipeline and the massive lighting pipeline. And so now in my downtime, I started writing a wrapper for the massive lighting tools in Perl so that they would function in the same way that the character lighting tools did.
Wow.
So that when they started moving lighters from character lighting, hero lighting to massive lighting, that there wouldn't be a learning curve to try and figure out what you needed to do. I don't know. I doubt if it's implemented anymore, since I'm sure that they're on Python and other stuff by this time.
Yeah.
But I tried to keep myself busy there, and for me it was like a vacation because I had just gotten done running a company, and so I was supervisor and animation director, and I was doing shots, and I was bidding stuff, and I was doing all of this all of these tasks. And so when I got to Weta, and they said, "Well, okay, you're just going to have to be ready for this because we're getting into crunch time," and so we're not going to have much time to light these things. He said, "Well, give me an example. Like, once I get animation, how long until the compositor expects something to be lit?" Oh, geez, I don't know, 1-2 weeks. And I think that I physically smiled and said, "I think that I could probably handle that."
Yep. That's awesome. Did you know, I'm just trying to, it's a long time ago now, Malcolm Wright or Dylan Neal, I think they were both massive TDs, but I think it was on Return of the Kings. I'm not sure if they're there for Two Towers. There's a couple of guys working in massive on all of them. I just can't remember the names. One of the guys was James or Jim, really
Okay.
short guy. But yeah, again, it's such a long time ago.
All of the massive guys around me are like superstars now. So Jeff Tobin,
Oh
um,
yeah, Jeff Tobin. He was a compositor before he went over there though, which always blew my mind.
yeah, but now he's like Mr. Massive.
Mhm.
And then a woman named Lisa Wilde, um, and then John Haley, who actually came from a Max background, but he's now one of the senior CG soups at ImageWorks.
Mhm.
Ollie Rankin, who is one of the supervisors, I want to say at Method, and Justin Coopers, who I think is a top designer. But all of them just kind of are at top tier. Well, I'm not sure about Lisa, um, but all the rest of the team, just went gangbusters afterwards.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They're all very talented.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's great. That's what I loved is like obviously New Zealand being right next to Australia, like we're all getting the calls to come over there. during all those films, especially towards the end, because we literally just can hop on a plane and
Yeah.
we don't need work permits. So,
Well, that's handy.
yeah, but no, that's awesome, man. So I guess we'll quickly move ahead. Um, Man, I actually want to pick your brain a lot more because you've done so much cool stuff. But I guess let's just get on point, and then maybe we can do another call another time. But I mean, one of the key things I wanted to talk to you about, which was working remotely, because I do a lot of this, and obviously you do too. I'm just curious, before we get into that, like you worked in you moved to LA, and when was the point where you decided to move back to Seattle?
I decided to move back to Seattle for my now wife. And so we had started dating in 2008. Yeah, that's right, 2008. And I was in the middle of a big project, and so I was flying up for the weekend, and then 2 weeks later she was flying down, and then we were just flying back and forth. And at some point I was wrapping up a large project, and it was like, well, this feels like a good breaking point for me to pack up and head up to Seattle. And I'm basically just resigning myself to the fact that there's no visual effects up here, or very little visual effects up here in comparison.
Yep.
So what I'll do is I'll write screenplays, I'll work on that, and then I'll work on any visual effects stuff that I haven't gotten my hands on because I've been supervising so much. New effects techniques, new rendering techniques, new renderers, things like that. So getting my hands dirty again. So that's what I was that was my plan. And my wife was like, don't worry about it. My salary will take care of us. You just do what you need to do. I just want you up here. Mm-hmm. And so then I got hired at, people just kept on sending me stuff. Like, are you available? Well, yeah, I'm available, but I'm in Seattle. Oh, that's all right. We'll just send it to you. And you just send it back. But that took 15, 16 years of building up relationships for them to trust me to do that I would deliver the stuff. So they just kept on sending me stuff, and then Leica hired me for a project, and right from Leica, Prime Focus hired me up in Vancouver, and so Vancouver is a 2.5 hour drive from Seattle. Yep. So I would just go drive home on the weekends and then stay up in Vancouver during the work week, which got tiresome after 2 years. And then I left Prime Focus. It was kind of a mutual disbanding, because Prime Focus really wasn't busy at the time, but they were keeping me around as a CG and visual effects supervisor.
Yep.
But what I had become, I had just morphed into this bidding producer. So all I was doing was reading screenplays and bidding them out. And so at the end, it was like, you know what? You don't really need me. You're paying me a lot of money to do something that somebody else could do, and I could be home. And they said, yeah, we're paying you a lot of money for not doing anything. I think that we need to send you home. And it happened at like exactly the same moment. And the week before, I had gotten a call from a place in Seattle that wanted to bring me on. And that was I think the crux of it, because I said, listen, I have something in Seattle that'll be about 6 weeks or so. Do you need me?
Yep.
And at that point, it was like, yeah, we don't need you. And so I just moved back to Seattle, and I've been working for that place ever since, and that was a couple of years ago. So now I just work from home for places in LA, or for some reason I'm getting a following in Utah.
Really?
Yeah, mainly from my relationships. My relationship with a guy named Jared Phillips, who used to work at House of Moves, and I stayed friends with. He moved back to his hometown, which is just outside. I think it's Ogden, But he's staying in the film industry, but around there. So when visual effects stuff comes up, he goes, "Yeah, I have a friend who's in Seattle. He'll do this stuff for you." So I'm getting stuff from there, and then occasionally stuff around the Seattle area, and it just constantly keeps me busy, and I
Yeah.
don't have to go anywhere. So that leads us into working from home.
No, that's really awesome. And actually, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, building those relationships, even at the beginning of your career, there's so many people now that at the very end you will work with. I got an email literally, like I flew to South Carolina Friday morning, and I got an email from a producer I worked with in London like over 10 years ago. He ended up moving to Australia. I've never met him because I worked remotely from Australia, but when he's
Uh-huh.
moving over, kind of helped him, kind of just more kind of pointed him in the right direction as to places to live and places to talk to, put him in contact with a few people. And, I haven't spoken to this guy in 5 years, get an email, they're like, can you fly out to Australia because we've got this big project going on and we need people.
Hmm.
And again, like the contacts you have even back then are still ones you're going to, keep, as long as you keep those healthy relationships, like they're,
Yeah.
it's well worth it.
Well, when you're first starting out, especially, you need to generate those relationships, and not just relationships with the supervisors, where it's all well and good to have like a talking relationship with Dennis Murin or
Hmm.
or Joe Letary or something like that. If you're just starting out, everyone else is growing at the same rate that you are, and so as you grow, they are also growing, and those people are eventually going to be supervisors or sequence leads or whatever at different places.
Yep, exactly.
And so by maintaining those relationships, and because you're essentially this is your class, you're growing up with them,
Yes.
and you're all graduating. Some people graduate faster than others, but you're all graduating and growing at the same rate. So people that I knew when I first went to or moved down to Los Angeles and lived with in apartment buildings, got to know, and a lot of those people are winning Oscars or making movies or all of this, because we were all young once and we're all growing at the same time. So I have people who've won Oscars for screenwriting and VFX, and been nominated for Oscars for acting. And I can call them friends because I've maintained those relationships, and those people who are working as filmmakers will eventually remember. Oh yeah, that's right. Todd does visual effects. I wonder.
Todd worked at Maxine Cafe back then.
Yeah. I wonder if he still does that, because we need some visual effects on this show.
Yep, and like that's another key thing is the more I wouldn't say feelers because like the whole point of contacts is you don't go out there specifically to network, and I don't know the ones who do, the ones who like I've known some people I go out and you literally see them when they meet your friends just start to like leech onto them, and they're almost
Hmm.
like adding them to Facebook and everything before you've even finished your first beer. And
Yeah.
the thing is that like it's just so obvious when people do that, but like when you
Yeah.
actually build these genuine relationships with people, and the more that you build them, again, you do it because you all have the same passion, the same interests, but the more that you have those out there, the more opportunities you have. And that's the thing is like we're all in the same boat here. I mean, you do it for a certain amount of time, you're not really going to be hurting for work, and
Hmm.
so it's kind of at the point where once you've paid your dues, you don't need to really go and seek the work. You've got enough relationships that you've built that there's always going to be people who are going to hit you up and say, what are you up to next week? It's like, well, actually I'm wrapping this project,
Yeah.
this is perfect timing, and you just kind of leap from one place to the next. And a lot of people, I think, when they're first starting out, kind of see that as that's a lot of work. I want instant results. I don't want to like build a relationship for 10 years from now. And
Yeah.
the thing is that you got to look at, okay, well, this is all part of the hustle that you got to do, and it's not about doing it because of that, but in the end, knowing everyone else and being embedded in the community, being active,
Yeah.
and taking that initiative is all going to pay off in the end.
Yeah. Basically, you need to get yourself in the room, and you need to be part of that room, in an integral way. It's an art form to try um, and you need to be genuine. You need to be genuine about being interested in the other person and talking with the other person, and it's always about uh, offering of yourself first before seeking something from them.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good valid point there too. Is you rather than going to people to get something from them, if you focus your energy on helping everyone else and you put that in, then naturally it's all going to come back to you. And I mean that
Yeah,
not in some kooky, far out there way, but as in, the more you invest in everyone else, the more they're going to invest in you.
yeah,
And
yep.
so when you first started working, I mean, what are you? I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. You're quite experienced in working remotely, and again, this is something I do a lot of too. And my eyes kind of really lit up when you mentioned, I kind of suggested this, just because 90% of the work I do is remote. And for instance, I bumped into you at Blur recently. You're just popping in for a visit,
Yeah,
and was that Rose that I met that day?
it was. Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I literally went back to Blur because, like, I mean, I've talked to them forever and I've known them forever, but I literally went back just because I had one of those moments, which I'm sure you get as well, where it's just like I wouldn't mind working with some people for a change, just because I had done several features and without like having that interaction, it had been about a year since I worked with any other studio, and you go through a phase like maybe every year that you just want one job just to do with other people, just for the sake of getting that motivation and inspiration from everyone
sure.
around you. And yes, I mean, I just went back because I wanted to have that again for a little bit. And like we both do a lot of this, and it's for me, I find it really beneficial because it means I can. It's just the same with freelance too, but like I can take breaks when I want. It also means that I'm a little bit more flexible with how and when I work, and more importantly, I get to use my own pipeline and my own tools, which for me means I can really customize things specifically to what I'm doing, rather
Right.
than having to work the same way everyone else might potentially work. And
Yeah.
I don't know, like what do you see as being the main advantages as well as the pitfalls of working remote?
I think the main. Let's start with the main pitfall. The main pitfall is that you don't have your peers or other people to learn from. So you're working in isolation, and kind of in an industry vacuum. And so I know that there are some very very smart people at Blur, kind of Margot and so where you can where just being around them is inspiring, and they'll say, you know what, I was just putting together this stereoscopic thing, take a look at this,
Mm-hmm.
and you may not have even thought, oh yeah, I want to get into stereo, um, but now you've been exposed to it, and in at home you're not in that situation. And also, it is harder to maintain those relationships because you actually have to reach out and work at it, as opposed to being in the studio. People are around you, so just by the sheer fact that you're there, you're having interactions with people
Yep.
and building relationships. Um, so uh, that would be the pitfall. Another pitfall is that you don't have as much power as like render power
Mm-hmm.
as you do, or computing power, as when you're in a studio, um, and so you have to be a little bit more diligent about being efficient, which is an upside as well. Being aware of the weight of your files and the render times, and balancing all of that stuff out when you're home is a little bit more of a thing than when you're in a studio that has a gazillion CPUs to render on.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is changing with the cloud rendering,
Yeah, and we
but
will get to that because
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's gonna be something great to talk about in a little bit. And I guess like it's kind of funny that you and I both agree that like, oh, the downside of working remotely is you get lonely occasionally. I mean, I think that when you're starting out, and I guess it really is a good point that it's more maybe the evolution of an artist, but like initially starting out, I think no matter how much school, how much learning you do on your own, like the first 2 weeks of working in an actual TV studio for me felt like I had completely evolved. And this thing is like just having other people around you both to inspire you, motivate you, and sometimes mentor you as well. It's so valuable to have, and even in the later years, just that collaboration, like sometimes just taking a break and seeing what other people are doing, it's all really inspiring. And later, working remotely, like working for yourself, like I do think that only a certain amount of people can do that, because it's more about when you're at that level that you are more self-sustained, that you're able to foresee problems before they pop up. You're able to communicate with clients. You're able to hold your own and get shit done and keep to a schedule, motivate yourself. There's a lot of stuff that you need to do, and you need to kind of juggle a lot of different hats, even IT when you're working for yourself.
Yeah.
So it's kind of more when you get to that level before you can kind of do it. But when you do, like I think that for a lot of us, and I was talking about this recently with a buddy of mine, but like, ILM is a good example where I've seen guys who would fly up they all live in LA, they got family in LA, they'll go and do a 6-month stint and work at ILM, and it's all great. Then they go home, and then a month later they get a call, can you come back for another 6 months? And
Hmm.
that sort of thing, it isn't sustainable. If you want to have a family and everything else, you can't always chase the work. And I do think that
Absolutely.
this is definitely where it's kind of heading, both artists being able to work remote, as well as like again looking at ILM, how they set up the pod in LA. That to me kind of was a very big step for them, like being able to set up a studio that's all PCO IP, so that way it's all hooked into their main server and they can work. Like they've
Yeah.
got 100 monitors and 100 keyboards, but they don't have any systems there, and it means that they can hire a lot of LA talent or wherever the talent's going to be, do the
Yeah.
work, and then literally shut it down when the production's done for very little overhead.
Right.
So, it's kind of the best of both worlds. But I think there's a huge benefit for artists being able to work remote, because it means, yeah, they can work at the pace that they work. And I mean, I guess the big issue is going to be when like bidding out shots, things like that. And that's one thing before we did the call we kind of talked about briefly, was learning to whether or not you treat yourself as a studio or as a freelancer. And
Yeah.
that's one big gamble, is that a lot of people, and this is what I'm curious to ask you, is like, I think a lot of people, when you suggest maybe working remote, depending on your skill level, they may get a little bit nervous about whether or not, because they can't keep an eye on you, whether or not you can do the work and be trusted to log the hours that you're going to log and all
Yeah.
that. How do you usually when you deal with that friction, like how do you handle it?
It's more of a situation where they subcontract out to me. So I'm a company. I'm a corporation. So really, I'm a person. And so they subcontract out to me, and then I deliver the shots however I'm going to deliver them. And so I usually work with people that I have relationships with or who have been recommended to me. And so there isn't well, are you going to deliver this or not? And part of that is being extremely open with the process, and part of that is just constantly communicating with them. I mean, I use Shotgun to keep track of all of my projects, and if I have other artists, then I can just add them to the Shotgun account for the duration of the project, and they can post stuff to Shotgun, and I can grab all of that stuff and just send it to the client. So I can have basically dailies with the client, or at the end of the day, I'll send it to them, and they'll have it the next morning, so they can look at and see how things are progressing.
Hmm.
But that keeps them confident that things are moving forward.
Yeah.
And once you go into radio silence, then people start getting worried and freaked out, and you start getting nasty calls and that type of thing. So it's
Yeah.
always it's always best to be the one who is communicating with them.
Yes, completely agree. I think that the biggest thing is building comfort. Like making sure that they feel like, okay, you're working, you're available, and
Mm-hmm.
as long as they feel comfortable, then there'll be that trust. Whereas, like, yeah, if you're right, if you drop off the, if there's radio silence or you drop off the radar completely, then that's when because they don't have you in reach, it can get very scary for them, and
Mm-hmm.
that causes all sorts of problems. Um, and so typically when you approach them, like when you start this conversation, will you say, like, how do you usually approach, like, hey, I'm actually located here, but, you know, I've got all these resources, and typically I work this way, blah, blah, blah. I mean, how do you typically approach clients for remote work?
Usually they're, well, for the most part, they're coming to me.
Yeah, sorry,
So
I'll rephrase that
they're
and say more,
contacting me.
like, how do you kind of proposition them, I should say, rather than approach them?
Okay. Well, after a conversation about what it is that they need, then there's, okay. Well, send me what you want me to look at and bid on, and then I'll bid it out. And after being a bidding super or bidding producer on Focus for 18 months, I got pretty efficient at it. So I would bid it out and then send it back and say, okay, these are full rates for what you want done in the time that you want it done. I can put a team together to handle this and this and this and this, so we can get this done. Now you come back to me. Where does that sit with you? So that, because there's always going to be a negotiation that takes place, and so my approach to it is that you want to go into it with full, full rates, full days, and trying to accurately bid how much time it's going to take with a contingency
Yeah,
percentage in it, because you want them to know what your value is. They're going to talk you down. It's almost inevitable that they're going to that they're going to try and compromise that. Um, and because you've already built in contingency and all of that, and hopefully built in time on top of that, you have some room to play. But you want to set a value for yourself in their eyes, so that they feel that they are getting value from you.
yeah, they're taking you seriously.
Right,
Yep.
exactly. So you don't want to say, well, yeah, I could do this for like $10. It'll take an hour. Because if they don't take you seriously, you won't get it done in an hour, and then what you gained is $10. So there's a psychological factor to this, that people value things that they feel they're paying more for, even though the value may not be that much.
Yep.
And so if they think that something is more valuable, and then they have somehow talked you down to something that's reasonable for them to pay for, then they feel that
They've achieved their job.
right, exactly. They are getting something, and then you are also getting the work, and so there's this game that needs to be played. But you want to establish your value, because you don't want to undervalue yourself.
Makes me think of South Park. Cartman in one of the episodes is always like, breaking my balls, man, breaking my balls. Come on, you're breaking my balls. You're absolutely right, because like you need to mark things up, because there is going to be that wiggle room,
Mm-hmm.
and you're right. They're not, if they can't take you seriously. Like if you give them a rate that sounds a little bit too good to be true, it's like, wow, I didn't even need to hustle and
Yeah.
bust them down for that. Like I did that. I had that recently. I got proposed to VFX Soup a film, and I don't know what was going through my head. I actually, at the time, I just thought it'd be a fun passion project, and I communicated to them that besides the shoot, which was out of their production budget, I would do the post budget at a pretty forgiving price, just
Mm-hmm.
because as long as it was in, I'd stagger it and do it over in my own spare time. And at the time, I thought it was appealing to me for a little bit of time, and the interesting thing was it wasn't that much money, and they it was kind of interesting because they spoke to a few other people about this, and some people were concerned because they're like, this should be a lot more money,
Mm-hmm.
so therefore, like, I'd be concerned about like this price that they've given you, and they already knew that for me, and I'd communicated to them that I am doing it for substantially less money because I'm going to do it more in the background while I'm doing other jobs, and it just seems like a fun job. I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
But there definitely was like warning bells going off in some people's heads just because, they expect it to be like abysmally higher priced, and without that, suddenly it's like, wait, this can't be. We're not going to get the quality we want. So by you saying I'm going to give you, it's kind of like when you go to a clothing store and some people will literally mark things up. They'll say this jacket's $500, but I'll give you this deal for $200, and you're like, wow, that's a really good deal. When it's just part of the whole process. But
Yeah.
do you find, and again, this comes down to experience, but do you find that typically what you bid out stays within that realm, or there's a bit of because that's always the gamble, is you get some clients who, because you don't know them maybe in the beginning, you bid a project and you don't take into consideration that they are making really bad decisions on their end, and
Mm-hmm.
because of that, it's going to cost you more money in the long run.
Yeah. Um, it fluctuates extremely.
Yeah.
Like I just recently did something for the Getty Museum, and it was cool because it's contributing to like art history and stuff, and it wasn't too complicated, and it was over a long period of time, and the producer was someone who I had worked with before. And so he just called me up and he said, yes, there's some junior guy that you can put on this because there's not a whole lot of money to it, but can you recommend someone? And I said, well, it's over like 6 months. And it's essentially it's not specifically flying logos, but it's basically a camera going around an object.
Yep.
And once you have the shaders and everything, you're just basically rendering. And so you know what, I'll just do it. And it was probably, and he actually knows the value of it, and caveated it with saying, you know what, I don't have your full rate here, but here's what can you do it for this? And you just weigh that out. And I said, yeah, I can put in like, I don't know, 10 hours a week onto this over this long period of time, and there's like no critical deadlines, and it's just kind of this supplementary project that's actually also was fulfilling to me because it was contributing to a museum and to knowledge and so forth. So it was worthwhile to me to do that.
That's great.
Whereas somebody else who comes in and says, I got 85 shots and I have $800 left, then there's just nothing that you can do for them at that point unless you're just in it to help them out.
Yep.
And sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's a relationship building thing. And you want to, when you get into those types of things, you want to make sure that they're under the understanding of how much value you're offering them. So you still put a budget together.
Yes.
At full rates.
Yes.
And say, this job is $25,000. But I understand that you only have 5. So we'll get it done, but it's going to take longer. And so we're just going to kind of pick at it, and it'll eventually get done. But because you don't have that money to get us on track, you can't have a specific deadline for it. It's just kind of, it'll be done when it gets done. Now you don't want to be an asshole and string it out for 5 years. But and believe me, I've actually done that. So don't try and do that. It's like shows that will just never go away. but you need to negotiate with them so that there's no expectation on their end that they can come in and start dictating the terms, because what it is that you're doing them a favor, because you do want to establish a relationship with this person, and but there needs to be a give and take. You don't want to be taken advantage of.
That's right.
And
And
that,
go ahead.
it's a high wire act to make that happen, and to retain those relationships. But again, it all comes down to communication.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, the two key things I think when you're dealing with like with any kind of client, really, but communication is key because you need to make sure that they feel comfortable, but also you're right. In those instances where you are doing them a massive favor, you need to still, as you said, educate them about look, even on paper saying, okay, here's your bid, it's 25,000, and then we're doing a 75% reduction on this or whatever it's going to be. So that
Mm-hmm.
way it's still there and they're aware of how great a value this typically is, and that
Yeah.
that way they're more respectful of it. And at the same time, I think educating them a lot of the times is very key too, because again, a lot of the time they're going to say, they're not going to understand the process, and because of that, they won't value sometimes what you've got to do. And
Mm-hmm.
it isn't about like kind of overcomplicating it by saying, well, I need to insert complicated keywords to, make it big. But if you just say, look, just so you're aware, this is, even going as far as sometimes I'll do this is giving them like a cheat sheet. In other words, like here's some documentation which they never read, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
here's some documentation initially that goes through my process, and here's how we work. Even then, that's building comfort. I think that way they feel like, okay, you're the real deal. You've got a system in place. You've done this
Mm-hmm.
before. But it also means that if they do like listen to what you say, then you say, look, we need to lock these things down initially because let's say we go and do fluid sims, you cannot be changing the modeling and the animation at that point. At the
Yeah.
same time, I'm going to be submitting reviews to you, even crude play blasts, and you've got to let them know that this isn't the final color, stuff like that, just because
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning you're going to have to get a bit of a feel for where they're at, where their understanding's at, what they're like. And again, the worst part of it is you're not there, and if you're trying to give people stuff and it's got to get presented to other people and you're not there to be able to explain and do damage control, um, A, they could throw you under the bus, but B, they
Yeah.
might not know how to present it and say, yeah, this is the finished render. And it's like, what the fuck? When you've clearly said, look, in my documents I said this, and this. So, there's all those key things, and I think it's about like knowing how to keep people on the same level and communicate. And some people, like, again, the more you work with them, the more you realize you can talk technical with them. Other ones you got to keep it simple. And some people you can write really long emails, and other people you're best just to do bullet points, because otherwise they're just going to be like, okay, whatever, not listen to it, and then later on be like, what the fuck, when they didn't read anything you said and you went down the avenue that you did.
Yeah.
But
And basically, in your document, it's like, okay, when here's where we're going to have approvals, and it's like animation approval or something like that. Here's where the animation approval is, and on this date, here's the lighting approval. And in the documentation, it would be, okay, if if notes go back beyond the most recent review, then that's considered a change. So, like if you're commenting on lighting and someone says, "Well, no, I think that the animation should be a little bit slower," it's like, well, that's two reviews ago.
yeah,
So you should have probably commented on it then. And so that's effectively a change order.
hmm
And as long as you're clear with it and it's in there contractually and so forth, and you have a leg to stand on, you have an argument that you can possibly win. And it is an argument that you have to pick and choose your battles.
yeah. You don't want to be seen as difficult just because you're trying to stand up for yourself.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where the educating comes in, because it's kind of like a bad dog. You can still educate them, but it's more just for the future, so that way they get it, that like, oh, okay, maybe we should look into this.
Yeah.
But there's two questions ago. Like, one is, what's your revision process like? I'm kind of curious about this myself. Just, when people are asking for changes, things like that, do you give a set amount of changes, or how do you typically work with people to make sure that they get what they ask for, but you're not getting screwed, which is very easy, especially when you're remote, because you're kind of out of the loop about a lot of stuff.
I think that if you have your communication up front, then you don't run into it as frequently. Excuse me, as frequently. And so, but when it does come up, there's just a conversation that's had, and you just basically have to give them a time frame, and whether or not they want to invest into that. So you can say, well, that change is like 5 days of reanimating, re-rendering, re-simming, whatever it is. You give them, and you'd say, is that worth it to you? Either in terms of time or of money.
Mm-hmm.
And because sometimes they're against a deadline, and you just don't have time to do it. There's no time to make that change. And in those particular cases, it's just balancing where you want to make that fight. And so if it's like, well, yeah, I can change, I'll try and change the hair color. I can do that in comp. And I can totally do that for you. But, this water sim, that's the water sim. That's what we got. And so, again, a high wire act in client management.
So you will do that, though. You will kind of revise the budget in those times when they are like making some bad calls and saying, we need this, and this changed, and you say, well, you should have done that earlier on, so I can do that, but it's going to cost you additional XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well,
yeah. And sometimes it'll be in a good, if I think it's for if it's for the greater good of the project, and I think it's a reasonable note, and it's not going to take me days and days, then I'll just say, you're right. It would be better this way. I'll attend to that change.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe there's a negotiation where that I can do this and this and this and this, but I can't do this. Yep. So you're not denying them all changes. You're just picking and choosing what changes you think are reasonable, and giving them as much as you can without hurting you.
Exactly. And you what you said before about offering them up like suggestions. I mean, again, that goes back to educating, but that's something that does build that trust. If you say, okay, I can go and change these things, however, you could go and change the color of the hair in comp, and maybe I render out just like a matte for it, and it'll save us this much time. More importantly, it's going to save you this much money. So you've got two choices, and by doing that, it's going to build trust in them that you're going to be looking out for their greater good, and that is really like powerful for building that relationship. If they know that, okay, we trust you, and you are going to make the right decisions that are best for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's
great.
And that comes from experience, and it also comes down. I have a motto in this industry, or any industry for that matter, and it's always take a meeting and never be a dick. And so always take a meeting, no matter where the level is. So if some kid is in college and he needs a visual effect, and he found you, still take the meeting, take the call, listen to him, see what he needs, and if you can help him out, then help him out, because that kid may be the next Spielberg or whoever later on down the road. Or if someone calls you in, even if you're busy, even if you're on a job, even if you're staff, take the meeting if somebody asks for a meeting, because you're meeting somebody new in this whole industry, and our industry is very small, which leads to the don't be a dick thing. And that is, yeah, just try not to be an asshole. Don't posture yourself as a supervisor. Don't talk down to your artists. Don't berate them, especially
Mm-hmm.
in front of their peers. Um, always have respect for everyone. Always treat everyone respectfully. It's just simple stuff that you probably learned on the playground.
It's not hard
Um,
to not be a dick.
it is not hard to not be a dick, and yet I see so many people there. I've heard horror stories about supervisors who are like in the middle of dailies when an artist pipes up. He's like, "No one was fucking talking to you." It's like, who? Why are you even doing that? That doesn't help any. Well, they've got to learn to, they got to learn to respect me. And in my mind, I'm going, this. I guess if you want to be like the Attila the Hun of the visual effects industry, or something like that, where you demand respect from people,
Mm-hmm.
then sure, do that. But I can assure you that John Knoll,
Yep.
Dennis Muren, all of these guys are just simply not dicks.
Yep. Yep. It always fascinates me. I mean, that's one thing I just did a talk on, like job interviews and kind of that whole thing. And the whole point, especially in visual effects, is typically if when you have a job interview, you already have the job. It's more they're going in to screen you, and
Mhm.
that's because your work might be really great, but you might be someone who comes in and instantly is demanding stuff, telling everyone how great you are, and
Yeah,
just being having so much friction. Did you work on the movie I know you worked on the movie The Mist.
I did.
Um, I'm not going to say anything beyond that, but I'm assuming you worked with some personalities there.
It's,
Um,
I usually get along with everyone. Um, I didn't have any friction.
I was
I
just curious.
can't.
I mean,
Not that I remember.
you were at Cafe, right?
I was at Cafe. I was
Yeah.
not there during Alice, which was a little bit of a harder show.
Yep. No, it was
Uh,
like yeah. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent with that one, but yeah. I mean, you're right. There's so many egos in this industry, and especially visual effects, where I think there's a lot of angst with needing to prove yourself, and
yeah.
especially because you're in Hollywood, but you kind of aren't at the same time. It's kind of there is a bit of a disconnect, and
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of people who feel like they need to go the extra mile to kind of really establish themselves. And I don't know. I mean, I think the longer you're in it, the more you realize like you're not curing cancer. You're putting pixels on a screen, and it's
Right.
great. But after a while, a lot of that goes away, and it's a job, and you make the most of it. But at the same time, you try not to kill yourself doing it.
Right. And you just treat everyone with respect. And I'm not I'm not pristine at that. I've evidently been a dick to some people, and it's come back to me because there's some places that just uh, I have a harder time getting an audience with because at some point I was a dick somehow. I don't know what I did, but evidently I offended somebody.
Well,
Um,
it's a stressful place too, and there's always that's the one problem is there can always be miscommunication. So even though you did a great job, there might be someone along the way that maybe was a dick, and they just needed to put that dick card on someone else instead.
yeah, yeah. I went back to ImageWorks after Weta, and uh, I had interviews throughout the day. I had interviews with I think it was like 8 supervisors on 8 different shows, and all 8 supervisors wanted me on their show, and I had um, recommendations from supervisors and people who are with me at Weta, and everyone supported me, saying, "Yeah, yeah, you should really bring him in." And then someone said, "No, I'd never work with that guy again."
Wow, man.
And so I never got hired there, despite all of that. And I think I was irritated enough that I went back to the HR person, and I said, "So this one person
Mhm.
outweighs all of this positive stuff over here." She goes, "Yeah, well, we don't want to cause any friction."
Well, it sounds like maybe that guy was the one being a dick though. Maybe
I,
he just
I yeah, I have I don't have a clear answer for actually what happened, but sometime somewhere I offended somebody, and it cost me a project or two or three or whatever.
It is really difficult because doing damage control on those sorts of things is actually really hard to do, because obviously the first thing people want is they want to avoid conflict, so they're not going to address to you what the issue is, and usually there's this radio silence. Like, they're just going to be like, thanks, we're good for now, or whatever blow-off kind of message you get, and 9 times out of 10 you don't even know that something had happened, and it could well be, and I have seen this plenty of times where, I'm just saying, in some situations where people literally feel threatened because they're in a similar field or whatever, and they don't want you in there. And I'd seen that recently where there was a map painter, and I recommended this other map painter for this project, and that guy completely threw the other one under the bus, even though they're friends and everything, just because he was really insecure about... He was the only map painter there, and he was just very insecure. It was very obvious that he was very insecure about having another map painter, especially one who was really well known, coming onto the team, because it would make him not become the man anymore. And it was just funny to kind of watch that, where he's just like, oh yeah, that guy is terrible and blah 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 blah. And in that one situation, at least, I kind of jokingly put my voice up and said like, wow, you just really threw that guy under the bus. And you just watch him like backpedal, and be like, oh no, he's really good. And and the thing is that 9 times out of 10 you're not even going to be there to catch those situations, and all that person has to go on is, well, apparently he sucks because so-and-so told me. And, later on you might figure out, well, actually that guy was, that guy has a personality of his own, and but you're not going to second guess the damage he's done. So those are really tricky situations, because it's kind of like, how do you undo some shit that's happened that you don't even know is going on?
Well, it's always a he said, she said. That's one of the downsides of actually working at someone. It's that you have to deal with people drama. And
however, sorry to cut you off, I will say, however, the one issue is also that if you're external, you don't have typically anyone to have your back, and it's very easy for them to throw the shit on the off-site person. It's like, oh yeah, that person's fucking up, because rather than your department is responsible, and I've seen that too.
Yeah, we got this stuff, and I had to fix all of the shit. We just redid it.
Yep. And actually, another thing, and this actually is something I want to get into, and we'll try and wrap this up-ish, kind of, but the other thing is that sometimes there's going to be issues where they're going to be like, oh, that person's too expensive, and we have to fix all this shit, and it all comes down to just they're not, either there wasn't enough communication in the beginning, or they're just not doing things efficiently. But one thing, and I've worked in many different situations, like I've tried out a lot of different variations to try and figure out the best way to do this, but the typical route is you say, we're going to do work for this studio, and they send you the files, then you go and build it all, and then you go and send them back the assets. You put on FTP, whatever, you zip up all the textures and the models and everything else, give them back, and suddenly they've got to go, the coordinator's got to download them, send them to someone else who's got to then send it to a few other people, and they've got to figure out what the heck's going on, repath everything. It becomes a nightmare, and that's more to do with just more inefficiency in figuring out the best way to handle the data. And and for me, like, I've worked on a few different variations of this, but like, obviously rendering on your end, if you can, is going to save a lot of drama, but then there's other tricky things that come into it. I've even worked remotely on boxes on site. In other words, they give me a node, I'll get my work to a certain point where, like Atomic Fiction, I did this, where they're happy with what I've done, and then I will remote into one of their machines to start working on the network with them. So when they do touch my work, it's literally on their network, path where it should be, everything's rendered, simmed, everything where it should be, and that way it's invisible, but if you're just delivering assets, then it's so easy for them to be like, okay, well, this didn't work, I don't know what the hell is going on here, I don't understand any of this stuff, and it ends up having to go through several people, costing a lot of money, a lot of time, and it's just more about, I think, having that discussion in the beginning about, how best to work is so valuable later on, because you might get the next contract with them just because they're not doing things right on their end, and you're not in control of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of different ways that I've approached that. At the place here in Seattle, Workhouse Creative, one of my workstations is actually there, and I have a login account set up on both my machines at home, and it's there, so I can work on that machine or my machine. Or if I'm working on my machine, I can just drag the stuff over to the other machine and reroute the paths so that they're the same on their network. I've also set up drive letters in the same way as what their pipeline is, and so it's just kind of a mock drive letter. So all of the paths, and I get the directory structure from them and so forth, so that when I do send something over, it works on their system.
Yeah, actually, even setting up a VPN, again, it really depends on the studio and how comfortable they are, but I did that on Equalizer because I was working both on-site there in Boston as well as in LA, and at least having a VPN means that you can path everything where it needs to be, test that it's all working. It's a little slower, but you have that option, and you can transfer files back to them. There is that transparency of being on their network. But again, when you're dealing with big SIM files, stuff like that, you got to kind of pick and choose your battles. But no, that's really good.
Sure.
And do you build any custom tools? I mean, obviously you're quite technical, but do you build a lot of custom tools for what you do, or you pretty much kind of go vanilla out of the box for a lot of your work?
For most of my stuff, I go vanilla out of the box. I have incorporated Shotgun at Workhouse Creative as well, and so I've started to write scripts and so forth to integrate it into their system, so that it works more fluidly and it's not a burden on the artists who aren't quite as familiar with it. So it becomes just more like they're using a tool rather than trying to custom make stuff. So every time I see some place that has an inefficiency, then I'll try and go in and say, okay, well, what can we do to automate this process? And a lot of that I learned from the effects soup in Vancouver named John Cowley, who was on District 9, and he was at Prime Focus with me, and he's at Scanline now. But he's all about efficiency. So if something can be done 20% faster, then maybe that one time it doesn't save a whole lot, but when you do it 500 times, then it saves days of work. And so if you have this automate, like making slates or exporting out different size QuickTimes for different reasons, don't assign an artist to do that. First of all, there's so many points of failure when someone's doing that over and over and over again, that if you just make a script like in draft with deadline or something like that, then it always comes out the same, and it always comes out correctly.
That's right, and then you can rinse and repeat.
Yep.
Quick question: do you find having the technical ability, being able to script, and even if you're an artist, just having a little bit of that background benefits you day to day with everything you do? Does it have a massive impact on what you do?
It does. It does, mostly for troubleshooting stuff. But when I do have the time, like I was saying, to make things more efficient, it helps to understand. Like if someone sends you a Python script, it helps that you can read it and understand what's happening inside of the script. You don't always have to write scripts from scratch. In fact, almost nobody writes scripts from scratch. You grab what you need, what functions you need, and you kind of incorporate it into a script that you're designing to do a specific task. So at least the understanding of scripting is really important. And Python seems to be the way that we've kind of gone.
That's right.
Industry wide, so it's not a bad thing to learn it, even if you're not programming massive pipelines or anything like that. It's another language that just makes you all that much more valuable.
That's great. And I'll try and go through these as quick as I can, but one thing before I just figured I'd dive onto, when you work remote with clients, do you, I know this is going to be a bigger question, but do you write up contracts for everyone you work with, or is it more, because I know obviously the bigger projects you're going to say yes, if it's a 6-month project probably, but then obviously the 2-week ones, is it something that you write up a contract, or is it more kind of you go through the trust of, knowing enough about them that that you're not going to get screwed, but do you physically go through that process, or just kind of start the gig and tell them how it is?
I've been writing up contracts more and more recently. Like the Getty thing, I had to write up a contract for them to review and incorporate into their contract, which then came back to me. But doing stuff for Bungie, I get a contract. Doing stuff for Workhouse, I get a contract. On a couple of other things that I'm working on right now, I have to drop a contract for. So yeah, that's just to cross T's and dot I's basically, and get everything in place so that everyone knows where everyone stands.
Yep.
And it's on paper.
What's your process? I mean, when you're the one having to draft something up, do you just have a template that you work from, or do you get a lawyer to put one together?
I just have a template. I don't, unless it's a really big job with a lot of potential for either there's a lot of money involved, or the delivery is extremely important, or something like that. You just have a boilerplate contract that can drop. It pretty much covers
Yeah,
it all.
right. I actually found, I just found it, I'm just wondering whether I should plug this or not, but like a Rocket Lawyer, I had the VFX Super feature not long ago, and I put together a contract for that, and they wanted me to draft up the initial contract, which I was a little bit sketchy about, just the fact that the vendor is the one putting it all together. But yeah, I found a website which basically you choose the discipline. So this one was aimed for film, but you choose like whether you're a visual effects facility or what you are, like a screenwriter or whatever it's going to be, and they'll have a custom template specifically for that, but based on all the variables you put in, it continues to customize it. So I thought that was pretty interesting, just because what happens is it drops it all up, but then from there you pay like $80 or whatever and you get the contract. And so obviously it's a bit of a machine, but just for quickly getting something together, at least the first time to kind of work from, that was actually a kind of quick way you could get a contract put up together in less than an hour, which was pretty effective. That's really cool.
You should get them to be a sponsor for your podcast.
Maybe. So yeah, I mean, that was the thing, is like, I kind of want to say check them out, but at the same time, like, I think you could easily just go on there and get all the info and copy and paste it out, and I think it's just more you're paying for the convenience of you pay this money, you get the PDF file, you can customize from there. So if you wanted to do it for free, you could just do it all and then just take screenshots and rewrite it. You can get as ghetto as you want to be with it. But the other thing is with Shotgun, because I mean, I agree, like, one of the most substantial changes for me when I started working remotely was I started working out spreadsheets and just working that way. And I typically have ones for the projects, ones for each specific shot. And even on that level, it just meant that I'd be able to handle a lot more without losing track of everything that's going on, and have that altitude, I'd have that perspective looking down on the whole project. And as it's grown, I've incorporated a lot of tools into what I do. Shotgun, I love Shotgun for what it is. I think as an artist, I tend not to like to work with it as much, just because, again, if I'm working on several shots on any given day, and I got a lot to do, I always find that's kind of one of those things that kind of halters my workflow a little bit, and that's again me personally. But again, it's not that I don't like shotgun. It's more I will kind of I will endorse it more for larger projects. But that's why I'm kind of curious when you mentioned that you'll use shotgun typically for just you. How much of an effect that has for you? How much it benefits you as an individual? Because I'd imagine the real power for that comes from having a larger production team where you need to communicate everything in a larger perspective.
It helps me to, like you were saying, kind of get a bird's eye view of what the project is. So, like on one show that I'm working on right now, I have about 45 shots, and then another show that I'm also working on at the same time, I have another 98 shots. And so one of them has other artists working on it, so it's nice to see when things come through the inbox and people are posting things. But when I'm going through it, it keeps me on track because I lose things less. I can go through and check to make sure that things are on track, and I've basically scheduled out myself for when I need to do things, because I'm almost always juggling 2 or 3 jobs at one time.
Yep.
And so and all those jobs need to progress at similar rates, and so I need to jump around between shots. And if I miss a shot over here, then I'll know about it. And the same goes because I have a naming convention and that type of thing. Things can get lost in the shuffle. And so working with shotgun, and I have RV connected to shotgun, so I can submit shots to shotgun automatically. Essentially, I can just load it into RV and say, here, submit this to this job, and it'll upload it to the web, and it'll tie it to my my local drive, so I can play it in the shotgun browser and review it as to where it was, in its last iteration.
Mm-hmm.
I use it for a ton of stuff.
Yeah, that's great, man. No, that's cool. And again, I just want to kind of hear your perspective because,
right.
Again, it's really great to kind of get insight from a lot of other guys who do work this way. Just kind of, I mean, is there any other tools you'd recommend that have substantially benefited you working as an individual to get work done and day to day?
RV, or a similar RAM player.
Similar RAM player that's customizable, or just a similar RAM player?
A similar RAM player. I mean, RV is tied already into. There's built-in ties to Shotgun as well as Deadline.
Yep.
And so that whole tool set just kind of works. So you can send something you can send something Deadline, and it'll automatically submit it to Shotgun and hook it into RV. And so if you have that all set up, then it all stays organized and with less actual mind power for you.
Even on Equalizer, I had I was doing a lot of blood splatters, stuff like that, as well as explosions and everything. But for simple stuff like blood splatters, like being able to quickly do a RAM play of something, and then I'd have scripts which would pull the plate from the intranet from Boston over and automatically comp my blood in, and it meant that I'd be able to get instant comps and feedback of my shots in real time. That you could, and all it is just pulling a quick script which would build a command line that would bring in the plate and layer them together, and it's very simple stuff. But RV being open-ended, you can do a lot with it, and it becomes really powerful.
Yeah, so RV and Deadline, and obviously there are alternatives. So like Deadline, there's Cube or shoot.
Don't promote Cube. I hate
Smedge. Smedge.
Do people still use Smedge? I haven't used Smedge since 2002.
I know. I was just at a place that used
Even Backburner, I hate Backburner, but since it became a lot more command line based,
Yeah.
I've actually started doing a lot of stuff with it, and I hate it, but for something that's free and out of the box, you can do a lot with it. Just it sucks in some other regards, but it's at least open ended now, which means that you can build a pretty heavy back end
Yeah.
for it.
So my recommendation is Deadline. It's not terribly expensive. If you only have two machines, it's free,
Hmm.
and you can. They have connectivity built in for cloud-based servers. So I think they support Amazon and Google um, and what is it, Azure? Is that Microsoft's one?
I think
Um,
so.
but you can, if you have a full Deadline suite or a Deadline package, then you can just add machines to what
Yeah.
you want to render. So Deadline, and I like Shotgun. I'm actually getting into F-Track to write up a review for them, and so that's a comparative uh, management tool. Um, and like you were saying, right, if you're an individual, you may not need it. You may only get a shot here, a shot there. But when you start to have to put teams together, or if you have multiple shots or multiple shows that you're trying to manage all at once, I can't express with more emotion, as emotional as it sounds like I am. Um, that you need some kind of management system, whether that's a spreadsheet or don't think that you're going to be able to keep it all in your head. That's
Hmm.
just dangerous.
Hmm.
Um, and so another thing that Shotgun is good for is that because you can have ties to assets on your system. If you have a library, like I'm sure you have a library of
Yep.
splashes and smoke
Blood guts
explosions
and
and all
everything
that
else.
kind of stuff.
Yep.
So you could have a shotgun project that is just all of those, and it's just logged into the asset management system, and
Mm.
so you can just search for them. Oh, I need a blood splatter. Now it sounds like you've written tools to actually grab stuff, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
But if you have, oh well, I have this whole library of water splashers that we shot for this one project, that would be really really helpful to know where
Yeah.
that is and what they are, and if it's on shotgun then you can review it and say, oh well, I need this one, and then you can go grab it.
Yeah.
um, so that's a super duper handy way of using that tool as well.
Yeah. It's awesome.
um,
And sorry, what else are you gonna say?
nope, 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 I was just saying.
Oh, I was just gonna segue into net rendering because I think that's one thing that you've done a lot of. Is that the backbone of how you work these days?
I was waiting for Zinc to resurrect
Hmm.
because I had it set up and it was just such a beautiful system. Um, I mean, you could render the stuff. Your 3D renders got downloaded automatically to your system. The paths were adjusted automatically, and then you could do comps on your system and then throw it to the network, and it would use the assets that were in the cloud and then send you your final comps back. And it was just seamless and automatic and just lovely. And then they went to Google.
Yeah.
So now we just have to wait a little bit. Render Rocket and other services like that. I guess Green Button was bought by Microsoft, right? So are they in a development turnaround, or did they?
I'm out of the loop with them, but it seems like everyone is kind of jumping on this because it's definitely where things are going, having everything in the cloud, really, in terms of
Yeah,
computer power.
yeah. I did do Render Rocket for a lot of the Getty stuff that I did. They just basically bought a whole shit ton of credit, and they said, "Here, use this stuff." It was a little bit more manual than I would have liked, and a little less adaptable, I should say. But it was fine. Their machines were a little bit slower. If you control the servers that you have in the cloud, so if you know how to set up Amazon servers or Google servers or whatever, and you happen to need a 32 core machine and can afford it, you can have access to it. So and yeah, I need 1,000 frames done by tomorrow. Well, you can do that. Without it's getting easier and easier to get that situation working, and so there's pay attention to your pay attention to your licensing. Obviously, you don't want to get tagged for misusing licenses in that situation. So make sure you know what the limitations are, so you don't have to control that.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is like even with hardware, you got to make sure if you're doing really heavy duty renders to make sure that you are filtering to only use really powerful machines, because otherwise, you've got renders that are going to go through, they're going to get 90% of the way there and hang, and this is a waste of CPU cycles. So, there's a lot of little gotchas that definitely can eat up time and money, but what's your take? Do you find that it's really cost effective for what you're doing?
It's cost effective for what I'm doing because I'm not rendering day and night. And so I just need it in bursts. And so it becomes very effective because I don't need a $20,000 render stack in my garage or something like that sitting idle for 70% of the job. And only powered up when I need it, when I could just spend $200 for a night's worth of rendering.
Exactly.
For some place that for the larger studios or for Blur or in fact I was talking to some Blur people and they said we figured out that it just wasn't cost effective to do it on the cloud, and I'm like, yeah, you're rendering all the time. Like day and night you are rendering, and so I can see how that doesn't balance out.
Well, what was interesting on Halo was that because Blur is now in Culver City right next to Sony in one of the old Sony buildings, they have like a pipeline, a cable right through to Sony, so especially after Sony decided to start closing down a lot of their CG in LA, we had access to all of their render power because we had that connection. So we just started renting a lot of their computer power as well as ours, which meant that we had a pretty powerful, I forget how many nodes we had, it was insane, but it was amazing to just be able to steal all of Sony's render power as well as ours to get Halo done. So I thought that was really cool.
It's a little bit of a benefit.
One of our big, I worked at Atomic Fiction on multiple projects, and obviously they've been a really big mascot for Zinc, and for anyone who doesn't know, Zinc is running off of the Amazon's EC2, so there is downsides to that too, because Amazon can get a little bit pricey, especially disk space wise, so you got to be careful what you're putting up and everything else, but and also it's Maya based, so obviously Macs at this point, but talking with those guys, they're definitely looking into Macs a lot more now. But that being said, the big selling point for Atomic was on Transformers. It meant that they don't need to buy shit tons of computers and worry about all this stuff. If they need to get stuff done, we're always saying at the end of the project, look, if you need to get stuff rendered, don't worry about firing it out to the farm. It might cost $50, but you sitting there waiting an hour for a render is going to cost a lot more.
It is way more expensive.
Yeah, so just keep shit turning out as fast as you can. And on Flight, what was interesting is that initially we had a very small amount of shots, and then we ended up getting an additional 350 shots, something like that, dumped on us because Zemeckis, who has a lot of visual effects experience but didn't want Flight to be a VFX film, initially a lot of the whole crash was going to take place inside the plane, and there wasn't going to be that much effects work, and then it kind of grew and grew and grew. So because of that, taking on this many shots, it would have either meant that they would need to turn the work down because it's too much, or outsource it, or otherwise they would need to move into a new building just for all the additional computer power, as well as be able to handle the electricity and everything else, like getting enough amps in there. So instead, by using the cloud, it meant that they literally just were like, okay, well, we'll get a few more artists, and it just means a shit ton more rendering, because it was a lot of cloud stuff, which is interesting that you brought up that they've got their own cloud system now, because I don't think I had heard about that, but it makes sense, because clouds became a pretty big thing.
It's called Conductor.
Conductor, that sounds very much like them. It's kind of words they would use. I love those guys. Like we were saying this before the call started, but I kind of feel embarrassed at this point, because I've said so many mushy things publicly about them, but I've got nothing but admiration for
You've
everything.
Got nothing but
Ryan.
Mushy things to say about them?
Yes. Like Ryan and Kevin are both just really amazing guys, and they're brilliant, and it's one of those places, I mean, we both work with really smart people, but Kevin especially is in so many times been in situations where I've just always let him take the lead, because he just sees things as they are, and he's able to make the right call every time. And I don't know, I've always just loved the way that we've all been able to collaborate on projects and get things done, and it's never been those situations where you're all going down the wrong avenue and got to kind of go back 100 steps. It's just, you're always moving forward and always kind of getting wins. And I've just always admired like every business decision they've made, as well as creative decision they've made. So I mean, and they're great guys. They're really down to earth. So that's my mushy ratio for tonight. But yeah, I mean, again, they've called it for doing stuff on the cloud meant less overhead when rendering. And even with me, like we talked in the very beginning after coming on for Transformers, we're like, hey, we want to keep working together. Flying to San Francisco every time probably isn't viable. So let's test out a few ways and see what works. And we're both really open to trying different things. It wasn't like, okay, well, you do this. It's like, okay, let's continue to revise this and figure out the best way, the most beneficial way to work. So yeah, they're super awesome guys. And again, Zinc, again, Zero VFX was kind of part owners in this thing, and we were doing that. We were rendering everything for Equalizer with that, and so we didn't have any render nodes. I had my render nodes in LA, and that was it. And it's kind of a shame that it did kind of get taken offline to a degree. I think it still always stayed online. It was just with very specific clients, and that was it.
Yeah.
Because of the Google acquisition. But it's going to come back bigger and better in the long run for sure.
Absolutely, Google's Inc.
Yeah, but that's cool, man. Like, obviously, you've taken up more than enough of your time. But was there anything else specific?
You could break this one up. You could break this one up into two separate podcasts.
I'm tempted, but yeah.
There
I mean,
is one thing that I wanted to touch on, and that was finding jobs when jobs just don't simply come your way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a technique that I've been using since I started maxing cafes back in '97. So I'm giving away my secrets. But there's a lot of projects out there, so it's not like
you're not going to be ever hurting for work.
But back in the day, every Tuesday, Hollywood Reporter and Variety the issues would have in the back everything that was registered as in production at different stages of production. And so I would go through every Tuesday and look at the name and who was involved, and determine whether or not this was a visual effects film, or could potentially be a visual effects film. And then I would notate, okay, well, this has ghosts, this has supernatural stuff, this has this takes place in 1865, so this has set extensions and map paintings, things like that. And then I would contact the producer. Usually there was a number on there, or at least an address. I would check first to see if I knew anyone who knew these people. Then I would just cold call or get in touch with the with the production and say, and basically offer our expertise, our assistance, our services, and trying to get them get a relationship going as early in the process as possible. So you're not doing emergency work for them. You're helping them plan their movie, so that
as the lead.
Right, you're the lead. You're trying to help them make it so that they get more bang for their buck, and you're trying to save money, and you're trying to create more relationships within the industry. So nowadays, there's a thing called Below the Line, which, if you're in LA, you should get signed up for anyway, because they always offer free screenings for stuff, usually accompanied by a Q&A or something like that. So Below the Line, let me see if I can get the website for it.
That's really valuable information. I mean, I actually wanted to do a segment on this later on about just even going as far as being able to go through movie credits and kind of backwards engineer your way to getting email addresses and contact information for a lot of the studios. But I used to do that too, whenever, especially Australia, where there wouldn't be too many productions being done. So whenever you'd hear about, let's say, a couple of big productions that come in, as soon as you hear about them, finding out who's doing them and going directly to them and making that connection. One quick question before you give the URL. When you typically approach those studios very early on, there would still be usually a visual effects supervisor assigned to that feature already by that point, wouldn't there? So you're more going to end up syncing up with them.
Yeah, if the show is large enough. If the show is a small thing, which back in the day it wasn't necessarily so much the case, but nowadays every film has some visual effects in it some
That's
way.
Right.
I can't even think of any film that I've seen recently that doesn't have a visual effects crew on it, no matter how big or small. So when you approach them, you gauge where they're going to be. So, like, if you see War of the Worlds in production and Steven Spielberg is directing, well, you can just say, okay, well, Allan has this one. Dennis Muren's going to be the supervisor on it, and we can probably eliminate that out from trying to get work from the studio. However, you could go to ILM and contact them if you have contacts there. Nowadays, probably not a viable thing. They have the people that they outsource to. They'll outsource to Scanline, but they outsource to people that they trust. And
typically the way that they do this, because it's still a pretty recent thing for ILM to outsource, and they were doing it a lot more a couple of years ago, and I think they've kind of changed their whole business model again to more accommodate. Now I think it's more about they're just going to start tackling the work worldwide and throwing everything they have at it. But for a while, I think that they were more trying to outsource and work more as we'll provide the supervisors, we'll do the chop shop, auto body chop shop, and strip everything down, send it out to everyone, and they'll do it, and we'll reassemble it, and you'll never know the difference. But typically, to get in with them, they wanted you to have at least one complete feature under your belt, minimum. And so that meant if you're a new studio, whoever else, when you approach them, you need to have at least one complete feature that you can say, we succeeded in pulling this off. So that's like the bare minimum, just to kind of get in the door and discuss it with them. I do know a lot of facilities who would, in addition to that, set up like a satellite office of like one person and a desk near them, just that way they have the physical location or presence as well. So there's a few things like that, but I know like Atomic, when they first reached out to them, that was like a big key thing that they said you need to have before we'll talk to you.
Yeah.
And
that totally makes sense. But it doesn't. The worst that they can say is no.
Exactly.
And so if you do that over a period of years, it's exactly like going after if you wanted to be an artist at ILM. Maybe you don't have enough stuff on your reel, but if you send stuff every year and your reel grows and grows and grows, they're watching you, and you get to a certain level, and they'll bring you into the fold. So in the same way as working freelance or as working as a company, you can build those kind of relationships as well. Now, granted, you need to have established yourself, like been around the industry as long as we have, so that again there's that trust thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just with clients, but with other visual effects places that have gone to subcontract helps you.
That's right. And you have that link?
I do. It's called www.findfilmwork.com.
Great.
And that is for below the line, and essentially it's for everyone who's on set looking for productions to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's there for. It's not like I'm hacking. This is
it's a resource.
This isn't a resource that's made for us, because technically we are below the line. And so if you're in the VES, it's $10 a month, or $100 a year. If you're not in the VES or another guild, there's a ton of guilds that are listed that you could qualify for IATSE, or I think is in there, and or if you're an editor or whatever, you get that. Otherwise, it's like $15 a month or $158.
So,
but
pay the $300 to VES then.
Exactly, and then you get $50 off.
Yep.
And so I go in here and just basically do exactly what I explained, and that is you just check, you gauge what kind of films will have visual effects, and like I said, every film has a visual effects in it now. And the smaller ones, the independent ones, the people who are shooting films for $500,000 or $3 million or $10 million, they're not going to have a huge visual effects budget, but they need visual effects. And so that's where we as individuals can step in and say, yeah, I can replace that sky for you. And they don't have to pay the $5,000 for a studio to open the file. You can basically help them with their film, and that's usually the way that I frame it with emails or whatnot. I come in and say, well, it sounds like your film's a pretty small character-driven film, but I noticed that you have a lot of exterior shooting in Montana, and just from my experience, it's really hard to get the skies that you want. It may not be the perfect clouds. It may be cloudless, but you want clouds. It may be rainy. Maybe you have no control over that. And so when you come back, you're going to want to change some of this stuff. And so let me help you plan for that kind of thing.
That's right.
And
that's cool.
So I haven't been doing it as much lately, but I try and do it, set a reminder to do it once a week, and if you just hit one production every week, that's like 52 contacts that you've made.
Yeah.
And if you do 5 in each sitting, that's 250 productions that you've contacted over the year. And they may say, oh, well, you have a visual effects supervisor, and you go there, okay, that's totally cool. I wish you the best of luck. I keep my number in case anything happens.
Exactly. You're just planting the seed.
Right, exactly. And so you're getting them to know you. And so the idea is there's going to be huge movies, and you just have to discount those and say, I'm not going to work as a freelancer on Transformers 8. They've dialed that in pretty well. They don't need me. But the guy who's planning on submitting to Sundance may need a little bit of help.
Yep. That's great. It's really cool. And just finally, is there any additional resources like places online you'd recommend learning, or additional things for 3D, or anything specific that you think that would be valuable for people wanting to get more into this stuff?
Depending on the level that you're at, uh, I really like the guys at FXPHD.
Hmm.
Mike and John and all of us guys. I just like them as people. I like what they stand for,
Yep.
and I like their classes because they're essentially upperclassmen classes. They assume that you know a certain level of and are competent to a certain level, so that they don't have to handhold you through everything.
Must like Red Camera.
Well, yes. um, but I have subscriptions to digital tutors and CMI because I never know when I'll need to find out a very, very specific thing. Like if I'm in Photoshop or something, it's like,
Yep. Yep.
why can't I freaking get this layer into this other
Yep.
document with these tabs? This is driving me crazy. And
With
I
that,
could
I was
sit
in
there.
Adobe Audacity, and I'm like, why is my play button turning green? It's just something stupid like that, but it's good to
Right.
have that.
So I frequently go into that kind of stuff, but any knowledge is beneficial because you always want to. You never want to stop learning. So as a professional, you're still a student. You never are the person who knows everything,
Yep.
and you should never think that you're the person that knows everything, because then that puts you in a very
In
bad
the
position.
the dick
Yeah,
area.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I
And
saw a
so,
great quote the other day from Michelangelo, actually, at age 87. Um, I think because there's like a meme that went around which was translated incorrectly, but it's essentially, still I learn. It's just as in, you're never too old to continue
right.
to learn.
Yeah, and you should not, and you should always be stretching your knowledge, even if it's not in your foray. So if you're a lighter,
Hmm.
there is no harm in learning to be a better. In fact, being a better compositor makes you a better lighter. Um, and knowing what's coming down or upstream down to you
Yeah,
is a benefit. You don't have to be the best animator in the world,
knowing the
but
process.
yeah, but if shit comes down to it and the animator for a scene has gone home, then
Which is usually the compers and the effects people are the ones who are tweaking keyframes and re-UVing stuff because they weren't done right the first time at the end of the project.
right, exactly, and so knowing what's coming from upstream and knowing what is going downstream is incredibly important because as a lighting TD, and I'm speaking as a lighting TD because it's normally what I get hired as an individual artist as, but if I don't know what my elements are doing in the comp, then I'm not giving the compositor the right stuff.
Mm.
And it also gives you the knowledge to say if let's say the compositor is a little bit more junior or he's not used to using AOVs or anything like that, you can go over there and say, hey, if you use this, you can control this better.
Hmm.
And again, don't be a dick about it. don't say you're doing it wrong. Just say, hey, I provided these for you so that you have more control.
Yep.
And then if you're and if you know what's coming from the animator, then you can go to the animator and say, hey, listen, I'm getting this animation, but the arms are spinning around.
Yep.
Can you check to see what's going on here? Rather than just opening the file, lighting it, and then sending it on its way. You really got to have a global view. You can't be focused on your task.
Agreed. That's
If
that's why I think it's really powerful if you start out as a generalist. It's always just having that core knowledge. It doesn't mean you need to know everything, but you at least understand the whole process, the
Yeah.
machine, and it will benefit you later on when you need to make stuff and you need to make sure that it's going to plug into the next person, either the compositor or send it back to lighting and know how they're going to handle your assets.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
great. And I wrote it down. Always take a meeting and never be a dick.
Never be a dick.
So
It's so easy.
let's wrap it up. It's going past midnight here, but I really want to pick your brain about a lot more stuff, just because there's so much. So I will next time. I will leave it here. I am just going to ask you one question, just because I flicked through your IMDb earlier, and one thing caught my. I'm going to give you one chance to guess, but one thing caught my attention when I was scrolling through your IMDb.
Mm-hmm.
Pearl Harbor 2.
Bromageddon.
Yep, because I remember seeing a trailer for that, and I almost cracked up when I saw that earlier, just when I saw that in your credit list. So, can you just quickly say what the hell did you do on that? I'm assuming an asteroid, but
We did the visual effects. We did all of the visual effects for it. It's the thing that you saw. The trailer is the project.
yeah,
So
I assume that's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we did the asteroids. We recreated Pearl Harbor. The aftermath of it. So sunken ships and smoke and Oahu and World War II planes flying by. There's a number of asteroids. We did a map painting for Hiroshima.
Did you go into this project like knowing it was going to be the greatest thing in the world?
We absolutely did, because we love the guys who are working with us. It's a guy named Taz Goldstein and Rob Magno. We met them when we were at Sony ImageWorks. So they did an internal project and we worked with them. And then when we went and started our own company, we stayed friends with them. And so when they had stuff to do, they came to us. And they're super funny guys. They're fun to work with. And both of them I stay in contact with. And Rob is usually the one who comes to me and says, "Hey, can you do this?" So yeah, we did the visual effects for
That's
them.
great.
They're not top of the line, but they fit in. They fit into the tone of the film.
Yeah, I mean, it was pre-Piranha and all those other movies, so I mean,
Yeah.
no, that's great. Like, I'll leave it there. I won't go in any further, but again, there's some substantial ones. Like, I noticed you have Ra 1 on there, and again, like, that was like a Bollywood film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's just kind of, you've got a lot of really key films that you've worked on, and some that, are quite iconic for one reason or another, and, yeah, I mean, you've got a great list of stuff. I'd love to go into it more, but we'll leave that for another time, maybe over a beer. But no, thanks, man. This has been really awesome, just to kind of dig in and shoot the shit. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk to you very soon.
We'll do, man.
And hopefully, some of this stuff is good information that people can.
I think everyone's gonna remember. Don't be a dick. No, honestly, this is great. Like, I think that it's something that the industry needs, and it's definitely where the industry is going. And I think that it's something that there's nothing out there at all about this subject. So I actually plan to cover a lot of this in some future episodes. So that was something that when you mentioned it right away, my ears pricked up, just because I knew it was something that'd be really valuable. And who knows, maybe down the line, if you want, we can, because I'm doing a lot of solo episodes, maybe we can get together and work on a piece together or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool, man. Well, let's talk soon, okay?
Awesome. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Adios.
Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. He has a lot of really great insight, and I really enjoyed talking with him about the subject, just because I don't really meet too many people who are very familiar with this, because most people do work from studios, and also just to show like really high caliber artists who are successfully doing this is really great. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a solo episode specifically on this in the coming weeks, and that's something I'd planned for a while, and it's great. I really want to include this because it is applicable to what I'm going to be covering as well, so check that out soon. So what I'm really excited about is this month I'm dedicating the entire month to working on building our careers up. And what that is it's December, it's the end of the year, and naturally we're all going to have goals that we want to set for 2015. And what I want is for all of us to hit the ground running. And that means that I want all of us to set goals for next year, and I want to teach you guys how to set goals and how to hit your mark with all of them. So I want to go through a lot of really great content on both learning to really pick up your skills, maybe move into a different area. If you want to move into supervising or really step up your game in your career, as well as money, financially, be able to work overseas if you want to do that, help build your name and build your brand. So in other words, if you want to start getting a lot more speaking gigs or even make money on the side, there's going to be a lot of stuff I'm going to do here. I'm also going to touch base on how to launch your own studio. So that's going to be a big one. I know a lot of people always wish that they could start their own company, and also I think it's just beneficial to understand how a lot of that stuff works. So even if you don't want to learn to bid on projects and seek jobs, it's still beneficial, I think, to have that knowledge. There's going to be lots I'm going to be covering. It's going to be a big month, but the biggest thing is that I want all of you guys to set your goals. I want you to think about what your goals are for next year, and I want you guys to set them. And in the next episode, I'm going to talk about setting goals and also committing to them, how to build a plan, so that way you can realistically achieve all those things you set out to do, no matter how big they are. It's going to be really cool, and I think it's going to be very insightful. But more importantly, I want all of you to write down in the comments what your goals are for next year. And the reason I do this, I know it's kind of always a little bit uncomfortable to say that stuff if other people are going to see it, but it is going to make you accountable. And I think that's the strongest thing that you can do, is to say out loud, okay, my goal is to make $10,000 a year, or my goal is to get a full-time staff position with all the benefits that I want, or my goal is to move to LA or Vancouver and set up there. Whatever your goals are, move into feature films, whatever it's going to be, I want you guys to all write your comments, your goals that you commit to. And I'm going to work with you guys on this, and I want to hear from you because I want to talk with you guys about this. And more importantly, I think it's going to be great for all of us to be able to look back a couple of months even from now and see where we're at and be able to measure our success and say, okay, well, I set my goals, this is where I'm at, I need to step up and work faster, or I can pat myself on the back that I've done this much in this amount of time. I think it's very crucial, and I think that for you to do this successfully, I think you need to commit by making yourself accountable, by actually saying that, yes, I'm going to do that. So I have goals myself that I want to do for next year. I've actually got a lot. I actually have, and I hadn't publicly mentioned this to anyone until last night. I was having drinks with a few of the higher up guys at Autodesk, and I mentioned I've got a TV show that's in the final stages of being greenlit, which will be coming out next year. So that's obviously a very big one for me, and kind of unexpected, but I've been working on that for the past half of the year, and it's actually surprisingly looking like it's going to happen. So obviously my podcast, I mean, I love this. I feel like I've finally found a platform which I can contribute and really give back, and I really want to step that up. I want to, like, I put in all my money, all my time into this. I'm not making any money from this. And at least right now, I don't really have too much intention to do that. I just want this to be a platform for everyone to really help you step up your goals and really be able to hit the marks that you want in life and in your career and really become as successful as you can be. And this is, for me, a way to really contribute a lot of that, as well as get insight from a lot of other talented people who have those goals too, that they want to share their knowledge, their success on here. So that's definitely a huge thing for me that I want to focus on too. I have a lot of other projects that are up in the air, and I'm trying to decide my path at the moment. So I'm definitely in a bit of a decision-making mode right now too. So we're all in this, but for me, I'm really enjoying everything so far that's been going on. All the feedback I've gotten from this podcast alone has been great. Just hearing even the changes people have made in their lives so far. And this all came to be because I wrote a couple of articles, which right now I've only really written 3 articles, which was overtime versus productivity. I did 2 episodes on that. and or 2 articles on that, and I also did one on my life story, and I have gotten accumulatively close to 1,000 emails about this and how it's affected people. And I know a lot of successful people who tell me that my life story, which was called Unattainable, they read that every day, every morning. And it's not just one person, it's a few people I know read that every morning before they start their day. And to me, that's awesome. It's a huge motivator for me. Like, it makes me feel like I'm able to have a bit of an effect on people's lives, and it makes me feel really happy that I've had a way to give back, because I'm so grateful of all the success I've had so far in my career, and this has definitely changed my life having all of this. And there's always people around you that affect your lives, and I want to find ways to help you with your lives and help kind of give back wherever I can. I'm really excited about the talk I'm giving on Wednesday afternoon. The talk I'm giving at Vegas is something that, when I originally got approached to speak at this conference, I told them right away that I don't want to talk about visual effects. I don't want to talk about 3D. I have put out plenty of information about that, and I feel like there are plenty of really talented artists who can contribute there. And what I want to do is help people really build their brand, build their career, hit their goals. And so for me to give a 1.5-hour talk in front of a few hundred people about what they can do, and to see, how this can really make an impact on their careers, that to me really excites me. And this month is a big commitment for me to put out all this content to help you guys with your careers. So I'm really excited about this. It's going to be a lot of work, but I'm really looking forward to having a chance to help you guys. And for that to happen, you need to make that commitment. You need to say to yourself and to everyone else that you're ready to make these changes. And the only way that you can do that successfully is to get out of your comfort zone and really commit to this. So leave a comment with your goals, and I'm going to leave a comment myself with my goals, and I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you guys can say about all this, like what you intend to do with 2015, how you're going to make your big splash. So that's it for now. Next episode is going to be the first episode where we're going to dive into the 1 month of changing our lives. So this is going to be every week all the way through to the new year. I'm going to be putting out 3 episodes on all of these great subjects. I really want you guys to commit and to be a part of this. I'm going to be interacting, working with you guys on this, and I want to help you guys get your goals. And this doesn't mean that you need to be just starting out. This is for guys who have got 5 years experience and really want to step it up and get more money or more success, or really build their name and get the appreciation they believe that they should have for their work, or for the work that they do for the company that they work for. Whatever it is, I want to hear about this. So leave a comment and let's make a big splash in 2015.